contact details on there in case that we don't have time to go into everything in as much detail as people would like. So I'm going to talk about Leicester City Council's declaration of the climate emergency and the action plan that we've recently adopted. So if somebody can move me to the first slide, please.
I have.
The next slide. Oh, it's not showing on my screen, unfortunately. There we go.
There we go.
Thank you. Just a slight delay. So yeah, the City Council declared a climate emergency in February 2019, and we were one of the first cities in the UK to declare a climate emergency. And there is quite a strong legacy of local climate action in the city, even before we declared a climate emergency. But the reason for declaring, as you probably know, it's part of our commitment to the Paris Agreement, and I'm sure all of us will be aware of that, and that in terms of meeting that, we're trying to limit global temperature rise within 2 degrees centigrade and ideally below 1.5 degrees centigrade. So the UK government, as you know, has signed up to this agreement, and the City Council is keen to play a leading role in driving the city towards achieving this goal. And that really means that when you look at the scientific evidence and estimates of CO2 reductions for Leicester and what we need to do to achieve the Paris Agreement goal, it means that we need to aim for both the City Council and the city itself, the wider city, to reach a carbon neutral position by 2030, so 10 years. That by carbon neutral, I mean getting as close to zero as possible in terms of our carbon emissions over the next 10 years, and then looking to offset what's left. And the UK government, as you know, has got a net zero target enshrined in law now for carbon emissions to get to net zero by 2050. So we're trying to do it quite a bit sooner than the national target. But we know that this means a huge scale of change and massive investment, changes to policy and legislation. And it means that we really need to work with a whole range of partners and other stakeholders and organisations, including schools across the city, if we're going to meet these goals. Next slide, please. Yeah, so we're just moving on to that. So as part of this, we developed our first climate emergency strategy and action plan. So the strategy covers a 3-year period from 2020 to 2023. It was recently adopted by the City Council on the 22nd of October. There has been some delays to getting it out because of COVID. And it's been quite a long journey to this point, involving a lot of consultation and discussion with stakeholders, community groups, businesses, schools. A lot of schools took part in the Leicester Climate Conversation a while ago. But as part of the strategy, we have an action plan for the City Council. So it sets out the council's actions to get to carbon neutral by 2030. But we've decided to write it on an annual basis because a lot of the funding that we have for projects is just for that calendar year. So there are some actions in it that cover years 2 and 3 of the strategy as well, but most of them are for the current calendar year. So we've just started to deliver the first climate emergency action plan for 2020-21, and we're going to be reviewing and updating the action plan every year. We've set up a board of directors across different divisions and directorates in the City Council to oversee delivery of the action plan. So at the moment we're just doing an interim review of actions delivered so far this financial year with that board of directors. And the action plan, similar to the strategy, it's made up of 5 key sectoral themes plus a section which has overarching actions. So, for example, we're currently looking to commission a citywide carbon roadmap study, which will help us. It will set out the steps that we need to achieve to get to carbon neutral by 2010. Okay, so one of the 5 key themed areas is called At Home. And because this is the City Council's action plan, a lot of the actions in this section relate to council housing. So I've just pulled out some examples really of the types of activity and projects in this section. So we're looking to build 38 new low carbon homes at Saffron Lane, and I believe the planning application has just gone in for that. And then there's things like loft insulation programme, boiler replacement, and just an indication of the amount of funding that is going into some of these projects for council housing. So on to the next slide, please. So at work, so we've got a pilot house redevelopment. So this is redeveloping factory buildings to create low carbon office space and startup units. We're also looking to work with local businesses and other organisations to encourage them to create their own climate emergency action plans. So we're hoping to run some workshops and provide some guidance for them. We've also got the Green Bell scheme, which is for small and medium businesses. So this funds energy saving measures like LED lighting, insulation, that type of thing. And it's been running for a little while. So phase 2 is just underway. And then there's also quite a lot of advice and workshops on how to become carbon neutral and low carbon via the Business Gateway. So those are some examples of what we're doing, what we'll be doing with businesses. And then under travel and transport, we've got a COVID-19 transport recovery plan. So this includes cycling and walking infrastructure, pavement widening in shopping areas, that type of thing. We've just recently launched an e-bike hire and share scheme. There's going to be a new park and ride site at Beaumont Leys. And we're also going to be engaging with schools regarding, to promote sustainable transport via Lee's team. And there's a target in the action plan to engage with 80 schools this year. And then there's other things like adult cycle training and also the redevelopment of St Margaret's bus station. So that's going to be a net zero redevelopment, and that's just been launched recently as well. Then on to consumer choices and waste. So again, these are just examples. There are lots of other actions in the plan, but we've got Metal Matters recycling campaign, things like home composting, and school meals strategy and project plans. So we're seeking or will be seeking funding for a programme of activity with schools, including projects around food and packaging waste, energy use, and opportunities for more plant-based meals in schools. Next one, thank you. And then we've got land use, green space and development. And this is basically around things like the local plan. So that's still going through the adoption process. So there's still public consultation going on. I think the timescale, it's been, again, very delayed because of COVID. But I think that will be adopted by 2021/22. There's going to be some low carbon homes at Ashton Green. So that's a site owned by the City Council at the moment that will be sold off, and a developer will be found to work with on that. The Royal Infirmary experiences a lot of surface water flooding. So we're looking at a feasibility study to rectify that. And then there are quite a few different flood mitigation schemes in the plan, but this is one of the largest ones, the River Soar, and that's in partnership with the Environment Agency and landowners and other stakeholders. And then I'll just finish with the school's C Starts Here campaign, which hopefully some of you may be aware of, and that's to increase awareness of the impacts of climate change, litter and waste on the water environment. So yeah, that's I feel like I've run through that at some speed, but are there any questions at all on that?
Yeah, if anyone's got questions, feel free to shout out, because there's only a few of us.
No.
Well, Mel, yeah, Mel, you got your hand up.
Hello, thank you for that. I was just wondering on the thorny question of consumer choices. I noticed that slide was mostly about waste. What the council is thinking about, and and how they're going to manage the situation, because without reducing consumption and encouraging people to make very careful consumption choices, we're not, I wouldn't have thought, going to get close to where we need to in terms of their impact. So just wondered whether where you're at with that really, and what thoughts you've got.
So that's a really tricky one in terms of measuring and monitoring. And so at the moment, because we're just starting this this journey, we're focusing on scopes 1 and 2 emissions, which are easier to manage. Those, so those are the direct emissions. So that's why a lot of the actions in the plan at the moment are around things that the council itself can deliver to make, you know, immediate reductions. But yeah, we're very aware that we need to work on scope 3 emissions as well, and look at how we influence consumption. And that will really be part of an engagement strategy that we're going to be developing in the next 12 months. We're also hoping to set up a partnership board with businesses, community groups, a whole range of stakeholders. And that's one of the areas that we could then discuss with wider stakeholders, because it's not something the City Council can do on its own. So we really need to engage and work with a whole range of audiences, particularly the public. So hopefully there'll be some media communication campaigns in the future, but we're not quite at that stage yet.
Great, thank you.
I was just also, if it's not too cheeky to ask another question.
No, go for it, yeah.
So I think, did you say with Ashton Green, was that's going to be sold off for low carbon development? Did I hear that correctly?
We'd be working with a developer, so it's not something that my team deals with directly, but we would be influencing the standard of construction on that one, and yeah, requesting that it's a low carbon development.
So that's so that's exactly sort of relates to the question I want to ask, which is, what power does the council have with development in terms of, because I know there's a lot of sort of, you know, guidance and requesting, and you know, that they have to do an environmental what's the word,
survey, impact assessment, and
it doesn't seem like the actions then have to be taken that environmental survey brings up, or that the council has. I'm just wondering if the council has any powers then to enforce, because we all know that I would believe, I'll talk for myself, I believe that very profit-driven organisations, which most building companies are, will do what they can get away with when it comes to maximising profit and not having to deal with regulations. So I'm just wondering whether there's a plan to find a way of being more rigorous, or, you know, saying that we won't give you further contracts or further options to buy if we don't see this level of low carbon development, or yeah, I guess
it's quite a detailed answer, so we haven't got a lot of time to go. It's a complex area, but there are a number of ways that we can enforce standards around carbon neutral. The main way is through the planning process, and the local plan at the moment has got new policies around that. So so that's one way, and obviously planning permissions and planning policies can be enforced. And also, if it's a site that the City Council itself is developing, then it can either set the standards or require that if the land is developed by a private developer, that they, as part of the contracting and procurement process, they have to meet certain standards. And the sustainability team that I sit in, and Lee and his team sit in, we're consulted on things like that. So yeah, there's a number of ways of doing it. But we're also hoping to lobby the government for things like improvements to the building regulations, because they don't go far enough at the moment. So, you know, minimum standards need to be improved across, in terms of from the UK government as well.
It's good to hear about that you're planning to lobby the national government as well.
I'm writing a lobbying plan at the moment for the climate emergency. It's just in a draft stage, but that's a really crucial part of delivering the strategy and the action plan.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks, Fiona. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
We'll swiftly move on to